about the SEGA CD that came out back in 1992. I didn't play this for too long, and the lifespan of the SEGA CD wasn't for that long because in 95 the SEGA Saturn came out. It had some really good games and some really bad games. This is my version of the SEGA CD. This is a JVC XI. This is a third-party brand that made this. I don't have the original SEGA CD console, but this was really cool because this was like a two-in-one thing because SEGA Genesis was still popular. So you would put a SEGA Genesis game in here if you wanted to still play old school Sega Genesis, and if you wanted to play Sega CD, you just pop in a disc drive right here. It also played music CDs as well. So I remember listening to music on this through my TV, which was kind of cool back then. This is the controller for the JVC XI for Sega CD. It's pretty much the same exact thing as the Genesis controller, except it's just made by a third-party company. But everything else is the same layout, the ABC buttons, the D-pad, the start button, it's all pretty much the same. Sega was a little behind on their controller features. I mean, it only had the 3 buttons. I mean, it was pretty bulky and plasticky. They weren't the best, but this is what I grew up with. I was more of a Sega kid growing up because, well, that's just what we had in our household. My friends down the street, they had Nintendo, so I'd go over to their house and play Nintendo on their games. We'd play Mario and Zelda, and then they would come over to my place and we'd play Sega games. We played Sonic and Phantasy Star. So that was kind of the trend back in the day. You just played what you grew up with. Now the thing about the Sega CD, and one of the reasons why I think it didn't last that long, was because they tried to do something revolutionary with it. You know, CD-ROMs were new. Again, this was before Sega Saturn and well before PlayStation. So they tried doing these like movie animations where they would actually film live action people and put it in the games. And the thing was that they would have, you know, really bad actors in it, and the quality wasn't that good, especially once it got converted to a CD-ROM for the Sega CD. The graphics just got downgraded by far. And one of the worst games that I remember was Midnight Raiders. They had this awful live action footage going on. You would be in a helicopter and you would see this guy and you'd just be a close-up of his face. It was really bad, and you'd have to shoot other helicopters. However, the hitbox was just really bad. It was really hard to play this game. The graphics were not good. The acting was just really bad. I just remember hearing lots of awful bad one-liners in this game. It just wasn't really that good of a game, but I remember playing it, oddly, a lot. Now, as many bad games that this console had, it did have a few great games. I have to give it out to Lunar. The Lunar series on the Sega CD was fantastic. There's an JRPG, or RPG back then, is what we called them, role-playing games. They're a fantastic series. They made a couple of them for the Sega CD. However, unfortunately, I don't have any copies of it, but they were really great games. You would go on through a huge adventure through the world, and it was great storytelling, great characters. It had a really good plot. The animation was really good. It had these animated cutscenes, and it was good quality. So the Lunar series, I do recommend checking out. You can emulate it now on PC. But the game that I played the most on this console was Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic CD. This was a really fun Sonic game. Again, I grew up with Sega, so I played Sonic. I played all the Sonic games on the Genesis, Sonic 1, 2, 3, and I just remember playing so many hours of Sonic CD. This was the next cool Sonic game in the series, and it had a really cool feature where you would run through a stage when you would fly by a sign, and you can either go into the past or the future. So it had this time travel to it, and if whether or not you went into the past or the future, the whole entire stage would change. It would either be in the past, where everything was still like uncivilized and just overgrown trees and animals running around, or if you went to the future, you can go to the good future or the bad future, depending how well you were doing. A lot of times I would just get the bad future, unfortunately, but it would be Dr. Robotic has taken over everything, and everything just destroyed, and you see all these metal buildings and oil rigs going on. So it was a really cool concept having that time travel to the past and future, so you can change the dynamics of each stage in this game. So this is a really fun game. I played a whole lot of it throughout my childhood and my teenage years. Another extraordinary game for the Sega CD is Popful Mail. This was a really fun action side-scroller RPG, Popful Mail. It had really good animation in it. The cutscenes was really good. I think that's what they got right. When they tried to do the full motion live action cutscenes, it was just really bad. But when they did the animated style, it was really good. And this is one of the best games on this console. I think this is actually pretty rare now, or expensive. And the last time I looked it up, this was like $300, boxed and everything. And everything's in here. I even have these little foam protectors. I don't know why, they just came in them, so I guess to protect it. And here's the CD. just so you can get a look of it. Have a CD, the manual and everything. It was all in really beautiful coloring. The artist that would create everything for these was really done well. I'm surprised. I really wish that we would still get these, but you don't see these in new games anymore. But Popful Mail is a really fun game. You played as a girl who was a bounty hunter, and you would go on an adventure, see the world, you'd meet new characters out there, so you could play as different people. You didn't get just stuck playing one character. I believe you had a choice of playing 3 characters as you progress through the game and unlock those characters. So the story is really neat, it was really fun, the animation was really great, so Popful Mail is another one that I do recommend. Check it out. Robo Left is another great game for the Sega CD. This is a shooter game where you would fly in the air as a robot and had a top-down perspective, and you'd have to dodge bullets and enemies, and you just go through the level fighting back and forth, shooting the enemies and flying back and forth. If you like those kind of shooter games, this is a really great version of it. Robo Last, the art style was really great. It was a lot of action going on. It is a fun game. They're difficult. I'm not that great at these type of shooters, but Robo Last, check it out. Now the good games on the Sega CD were few and far between. There are only a few of them. A couple other good ones were Snatcher. I think they did it right with Snatcher because it was a story-based game, and Sega CD had a lot of story-based games where it would have like some kind of cutscene going on, and you had a couple options that you would pick, and depending on what you would pick, something would unfold and play out through the story. But most of them on this console were really bad because of just the live action cutscene was just not good at all. But Snatcher did it really well because it was animated, had that cartoon style, but it was more mature animation, which was really neat to see. So Snatcher got a really great rating. Unfortunately, I wish they would have made more games like that, but they just wanted to go with that live action style. They thought that was the next new and cool revolutionary thing, but unfortunately that's what held this console back from succeeding. Battle Corps, this is a game if you want to get into like a giant mech, a big mech suit, and you just had this first person point of view, and you would just shoot endless monsters, just raids of monsters. I mean, that's all I really remember about this game. I don't remember too much about it. I just thought it was kind of cool. You had this big mech and you had all the computer things on your screen and you just fire away at endless hordes of enemies. So, Battle Corps, it is what it is. Dungeons and Dragons, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons to be exact. The Eye of the Beholder. I wonder what the Beholder is. For you D&D fans out there. Now this game was kind of cool because you got to design your own character. So you get to choose from all these different character sprites and what their abilities were. It had a first-person point of view of you going through a dungeon. It was a dungeon crawl game, and you would go through and you see actual enemies walk across the dungeon's halls, and they would come at you and you had to fight them and stuff. So it was actually kind of cool. The gameplay for me was kind of boring. It was a slow-paced game. I mean, I was much younger when I played this, so I wasn't too into it, but it did have a cool concept for Dungeons and Dragons. So if you are a D&D fan, check it out. Football, I mean, it's a sports game. I'm not a big sports game player, but if you like football, here you go. This is NFL's greatest. San Francisco versus Dallas. Lethal Enforcers. This was a great game. Unfortunately, I don't have the full box, because this came in a big box set. You had the CD, and you had this awesome gun here. Remember the arcade game Time Crisis and that haunted house on a haunted hill or something, that game? Where you would go through the level progressing and shooting this way and you would back up and defend yourself. So Lethal Enforcers was their version of Time Crisis for the Sega CD. This was a really fun game. Again, the graphics weren't too great, but at least it wasn't that live action. It was at least animated a little bit. So, and you would have like cars going by and you had to shoot people out of the cars, or you would be going through like subways and you had to shoot people that were coming at you. It was really fun. I spent a lot of time playing this game because this was my version of at home. I didn't have Time Crisis. That came out later on, and that was, that was really cool. I remember playing that in the arcade, but this was what we had, and this gun was really fun. I know it's shaky, rattling, it has a piece broken. I mean, I'm not even sure if this still works. It probably does, it's just a piece of plastic that broke. And another game that utilized this gun was Corpse Killer. Not as good as Lethal Enforcers, I'll say that. I don't know why? Because it had those awful live action cutscenes. They were just really bad in this. And in this game, you were on some uncharted island and it was filled with zombies and they were all coming at you and you just had to shoot all the zombies off the screen. But I just remember that the cutscenes, they just had these horrible cutscenes in it, so it really held the game back. I wasn't too fond of this game, but it was just something different if you wanted to, shoot your screen for a little while. Dune is a game that I played. I don't know much about it. I never really got far. I just didn't understand the game. I remember playing this and it had these swooping landscapes of the desert. It was all a desert and it would just swoop over it, and I was really confused playing this game. Wasn't too sure what to do. I I just didn't understand what I was doing in the game. It didn't have any direction in it, so I never really progressed in it. But if you like swooping deserts, well, Dune is it. Dracula Unleashed. Now this is another story-based game, kind of like Snatcher, the same concept, except this had, unfortunately, live action cutscenes, and you know, they're not that great, but this was kind of an intriguing game. Just the story was intriguing, where you'd have to go through the day and investigate the town and figure out what's going on. If you didn't proceed properly through the day, night would fall, and unfortunately if night fell and you weren't home sleeping, if you were outdoors, well, you'd get bitten by a vampire and you'd lose. It was a really slow game. I didn't get too far in it, but I remember playing a lot of it, trying to figure out what was going on, trying to unfold this story. So if you like vampires and you like mystery and detective stories, well, Dracula Unleashed is it. Prize Fighter, it's a boxing game. I didn't really play much of it. It's Prize Fighter, it's just another boxing game, so there you go. Now on to the really bad games on the SEGA CD. SEGA CD was notorious for some really bad games, and I remember Sewer Shark. This was one of the worst games, where you would be on a rail trail system down in the sewers and you have to pick your direction left or right and trying to get through this maze, and maybe these robots coming at you and you'd have to shoot them. Unfortunately, it didn't use this gun. You had to use your controller, so it had some limitations there. The response rate was not well. But this game had the worst cutscenes. Just ridiculous. All I remember was a picture of this big fat guy stuffing his face with pizza. It was so ridiculous.
Mission essentially here, kid. That was fabulous. You're the greatest. Don't forget now, a clean sewer
is a happy sewer.
I like that. It's got a certain ring, you know.
Stupid. It was just so stupid. I just can't believe that they would have these atrocious cutscenes in this game. I don't know what they were thinking. That's what really held this console back, you know. Didn't last for that long, but that's Sewer Shark. But one of the games that did manage to do that right was Lodestar. This was actually a lot of fun, because it had that same concept of you would be going on a rail trail system, except you weren't in the sewers, you're at least above ground, and you have to, again, pick your directions of which way you would go, or else if you chose the wrong way, the cops would be coming, you would just explode, and there'd be all these flying robots coming at you, you have to shoot them. For some reason, Lodestar just managed to do it better. It still had live action cutscenes, but at least they were few and far between. Iron Helix is some kind of space adventure game. I wouldn't really say much of an adventure. It's really slow. You had to get through this giant spaceship and figure out your way around. Except the controls and the command were just really slow. The frame rate was really bad. Everything about it was just bad. You would input a command and it would just take forever for it to register. You had no idea where to go throughout this spaceship. You just had the first person point of view and you figured out how to get to the end of it, I guess. I'm really not too sure, but the time always ran down. I just remember this beeping and then it would explode and you'd lose. So Iron Helix, don't recommend it, that's for sure. A lot of games I don't recommend. But they were fun for what they have, such as Surgical Strike. I can't tell you a thing about this game. This is another one of those live action motion picture games, and it had very bad hitboxes and you had to shoot something and blow it up. And again, it didn't use the gun for some reason. You just had to point and shoot. It was just really bad. Don't recommend that. I don't even know. This case is just destroyed and broken, so it is what it is. They're really fragile, so a lot of them are broken. So if you can find anything that's still in good condition, I'd say pick it up, because that's pretty surprising, because most of them just fell right apart. And you could play music CDs on this console. I remember this karaoke CD that I had. For some reason, I sang along a lot with this karaoke. I don't know why, but I did. It was kind of fun back then. It was just something new that you could do. So those are the few games that I have for the SEGA CD. This is the JVC XI. Again, it's a 2-in-1 Sega Genesis and Sega CD console. There are some good games out there if you can find them. You know, you got Snatcher, you got the Lunar RPG series. I do highly recommend that. You got Final Fight, which is a beat-em-up game. That's really good. I do recommend that. Popful Mail, probably one of the most expensive games for SEGA CD. I'm surprised I have it in such great condition. Everything is near mint. Sonic CD is my favorite game for this series. This is the one I played the most. Out of everything, I do recommend these two at least. Popful Mail and Sonic CD. So that's going to be it for today's episode. This is a SEGA CD collection. It didn't last that long, but it is what it is. So thank you for joining us today for another episode of Wormys Playhouse. And please like, comment, and subscribe. And we'll see you again for another episode. We'll see you then. Bye!